Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to what is frankly a hilarious yet incredibly scientific explainer. We're going to completely test everything you thought you knew about human endurance, psychology, and, well, your feet. Today, we're unpacking something affectionately known as the Great Vitamin Balance Experiment. So here's the question. Is your willpower actually controlled by the shape of your foot? I know. It sounds absolutely absurd, right? Literally like a joke. But I promise you, as we unpack the data today, everything you know about mental toughness, self-control, and why we either succeed or totally crash and burn is about to be completely challenged. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the Bizarre Vitamin Challenge. Picture this. You're sitting in a room perfectly chilled to about 22 to 24 degrees Celsius. There's just a little bit of white noise humming in the background to isolate you. You're sitting at a desk with an adjustable anti-slip office footrest. And the main piece of testing equipment, a perfectly round, highly rollable vitamin tablet. The difficulty escalates across 3 beautifully, or maybe cruelly distinct steps. Step 1 is the 15-minute freeze. You balance the vitamin on top of your foot with the footrest on its lowest setting, and you just cannot move. If the pill rolls off, you fail. Simple, right? Well, step 2 is the awkward tilt. The footrest is now slanted. You're pressing down with one foot while your other foot just hovers awkwardly in the air, balancing that vitamin for 10 agonizing minutes, completely defying your natural posture. And then, step 3, the smartphone buzz. This is pure evil. While you're balancing the vitamin, a smartphone randomly vibrates on average every 90 seconds. You have to fight every modern instinct in your body to flinch, look, or check that phone. Which naturally brings us to Section 2, the 5 human reactions. As we go through these, seriously, ask yourself, which one are you? First up, we've got the hyper-focused perfectionist. These people treat the test like it's literally life or death. They sit there like stone statues, regulating their very breathing from second 1. But right around the 7-minute mark, things get intense. They literally start feeling the vitamins slipping on their own sweat. Their reaction? They don't move a single muscle. They just roll their eyes in sheer panic, start silently crying and mutter, "Right now, a storm is raging inside me." They're physically paralyzed, but emotionally, completely devastated. Now, contrast that with our next 2 types. The hyperactive or ADHD-leaning folks, they usually tap out in about 30 seconds, complaining about foot muscle tremors. But their rationalization is absolute gold. They blame the vitamin for being too round, and then they literally eat it right off the floor, saying they might as well get some nutrition out of it. Absolute masters of rationalization. On the flip side, we have the avoidant or anxious type. These guys try to negotiate lowering the footrest before the clock even starts. They quit at about 3 minutes and then blame the unergonomic design of the footrest, going so far as to actively write a 1-star Google review for the manufacturer right there. It is just fascinating how our brains creatively protect our egos when we fail, isn't it? And then we hit the dopamine addict. These are the poor souls undergoing step 3, the random smartphone buzz. When that phone vibrates, their upper body is absolutely screaming to look at the screen. To suppress that urge, they overcompensate with their lower body, which, ironically, launches the vitamin completely off their foot. And the whole time, they're blinking a frantic 5 times a second and actually screaming, "I'm not reading it, I'm not reading it." It's a hilarious, pure panic response to technological withdrawal. So out of all these distinct personalities, guess how many actually made it to the end? Less than 5%. A tiny fraction of people actually pulled this off. And you know the funniest part? After passing this grueling test, the winners calmly brushed it off, claiming it was no big deal, right before collapsing with a severe 10-minute toe cramp, completely unable to stand up. So, the crucial point is right here in Section 3, debunking the willpower myth. You know, it's so easy to laugh at the folks who failed and just assume the winners possessed some kind of elite, godlike mental fortitude. But true success in this experiment had nothing to do with raw willpower. It actually came down to a very specific formula: environment, ability, disposition, and physiology. Think about your own life for a second. Any past failures you've had, whether it's sticking to a diet, finishing a giant project, or, balancing a pill on your foot, were highly likely circumstantial, rather than some fundamental flaw in your mental toughness. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why that 5% succeeded. Let's break it down. Environment. Their literal foot arch just happened to perfectly match the anti-slip grooves of the footrest. Ability. They had past training in stuff like ballet, taekwondo, or even just jumping rope, which pre-developed the fine motor control in their feet. Disposition. They had a cognitive bias that let them view this totally frustrating task as a fun game rather than a massive threat. And physiology. They just happened to have optimal sleep, perfectly stable blood sugar, and the exact right amount of caffeine that specific day. Literally, Microscopic details aligned to determine the final outcome. Which brings us to a really vital concept to remember: willpower ranking. As our sources define it, treating willpower like a simple scoreboard between humans is a scientific fallacy. It happens when we completely ignore how conditions and temperament favorably align to make success practically inevitable for certain people. Think about the pure mechanics for a second. If the researchers had changed the footrest angle by just 1 single degree, or if they had used a flat piece of candy instead of a perfectly round vitamin, the winners would have been completely different people. So ranking individuals purely by willpower here, it completely misses the underlying science. Let's move to section 4 and see how this builds, taking the experiment further. Because once you really understand the mechanics of this behavioral test, you can start poking at other specific psychological triggers. The researchers actually proposed some slightly sadistic but highly entertaining new variables for future versions of this test. First up, balancing a squishy jelly instead of a hard vitamin. If you press too hard or slip, it totally deforms, turning it into a test of enduring gross physical discomfort rather than just avoiding a drop. Second, balancing a heavy coffee cup on the footrest. Now, if your foot shakes and you fail, you don't just drop a tiny pill. There's a loud smash, adding the intense psychological weight of auditory shame. And third, performing the entire test right in front of a mirror. This introduces a diabolical double suppression challenge. You're trying to balance the object while simultaneously trying not to burst out laughing at your own pained, ridiculous expression staring right back at you in the glass. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Which of these conditions would break your willpower first? Would it be the physical muscle strain, the sheer anxiety of a random smartphone buzz, the auditory shame of a dropping coffee cup, or simply looking at yourself struggle in the mirror? The true beauty of this explainer is realizing that we all have our own unique breaking points, and they have very little to do with our moral fortitude and absolutely everything to do with our quirky, highly specific human conditioning. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this totally fascinating data. Remember to give yourself a break the next time you drop the proverbial vitamin and keep exploring the incredible science behind why we do what we do.